Hi, welcome to the Gemara on Lamed Amud Aleph. We are starting at the first two dots on the Amud. Chaliyot b'toch HaShabbat maktimin l'Shabbat shavra. Quoting from the Mishnah, if it, meaning Rosh Chodesh Adar, falls out during the week, we move Parshat Shkalim up to the previous Shabbat. Itzmar, it was said, an Amoraic statement, Rosh Chodesh Adar shechal liyot be'erev Shabbat, Rav amar maktimin, u'Shmuel amar ma'achrin. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Friday, Rav says you follow what the Mishnah says and move Parshat Shkalim to the previous Shabbat, and Shmuel says you make it later. So you would then have Parshat Shkalim the day after Rosh Chodesh, right after Rosh Chodesh Adar. Rav amar maktimin. So Rav's position is maktimin t'im ken b'tzari lahu yomei shulchanot. Because if you don't, you will subtract a day, or you'll miss a day from the days counting to the days when the money changers set up shop. So in other words, going back to our previous conversation, if we want there to be 2 full weeks between when you read Parshat Shkalim and when the money lenders open their tables, and the money lenders open their tables on the 15th. If you push off the reading and don't read it till the second day of Adar, there's not 2 full weeks between the 2nd of Adar and the 15th of Adar. U'Shmuel amar me'achrin, and Shmuel says you can push it later. Amar lacha, he would say to you, sof sof chamesar b'malei shabta mikla. The end of the day, the 15th is going to come out on Friday. Right? If you have Rosh Chodesh Adar on Friday, the 15th will come out on Friday. V'shulchanot lo nafke ad chad b'shabta. And the moneylenders won't set up shop until Sunday. Right? Even though usually they do it on the 15th, when the 15th falls out on Friday, they're not actually going to set up shop on Friday, which is Erev Shabbat. They're not going to do it on Shabbat, so they're not going to do it till Sunday. So you actually still will have a full 2 weeks, even if you read Parshat Shkalim the day after Rosh Chodesh Adar, which is that Shabbat. Hilkach me'achrin. Therefore, you can make it later. The end of Shmuel's defense. So we have 2 opinions, and now we're going to try to prove which one is correct. Tnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Chalio b'toch HaShabbat, maktimin l'she'avar, umapsikin l'shabbat acheret. So we learned in our Mishnah, in fact, that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during the week, then we move Parshat Shkalim earlier, and then we have a break week. We have 1 week where we don't read any special parsha. My lava filo be'erev Shabbat. Doesn't this mean even if it falls out on Friday, right? Doesn't Friday count as being during the week? Lo, b'toch HaShabbat davka. No, during the week specifically, meaning Friday doesn't really count as being during the week. So we tried to prove that Rav must be right, but we were able to defend Shmuel's position nonetheless. Tashma, so here's another attempt. Ezohi Shabbat Rishona, what counts as the first week for the purposes of Arba Parshiot, Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar Liyot B'tocha. Any week where Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during it, Va'afilo be'erev Shabbat, and even if it falls out on Erev Shabbat, even if it falls out on Friday. This is a breitza. My lava filo be'erev Shabbat. So doesn't this mean even if it falls out on Erev Shabbat? Jumiyat Tocha, Ma Tocha Maktimin Af Erev Shabbat. Maktimin, right? Just like in it, right? Tocha means in the middle of the week, and Erev Shabbat is in the middle of the week. So either way, you move it up earlier, meaning again that Rav's position should be correct. Amar Shmuel ba, v'chen tanad be Shmuel ba. So Shmuel says it should really say ba, which is different apparently than betocha, and so too tanad be Shmuel says that it should read ba and not betocha, and the way that this is being understood is that Friday is sort of a special case, right? Instead of saying betocha, it says ba, so it doesn't fall out. It doesn't include times when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Friday. Sort of any Shabbat on which Rosh Chodesh Adar falls, and even if it falls out on Erev Shabbat. So the time that is included with Shabbat is also Erev Shabbat. Kitanai, this is reflected in a Tanaitic argument. Misargin l'Shabbatot, we can skip a Shabbat, meaning skip, like have 1 week of Adar that doesn't have a special parsha. Right, have a parsha in between Shkalim and Zachor that's just empty. Diva Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. But Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, in Misargin. Nope, you can't have this skip. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Ematai, but Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, when is this, or Ematai ani Omer in Misargin, when do I say you can't skip? Bisman shechaliyot be'erev Shabbat, when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Friday. Aval bisman shechaliyot b'toch Shabbat, makdim v'korem mishabat she'avra. But if it falls out earlier in the week, meaning earlier than Friday, then you actually read earlier, even though it's Shvat. Meaning even though proceeding to that earlier week is actually still Shvat and not even yet Adar, you can nonetheless have Shabbat Shkalim or Parshat Shkalim be the last Shabbat of Shvat, and then skip a week. So the first Shabbat of Adar, you wouldn't read a special parsha, and then the next week would be Zachor. So it seems like Shmuel's position is adopted by, Shmuel's position is reflected in the position of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and Rav's position is reflected in the position of Rabbi Yehuda. So it doesn't solve the argument, but at least it tells you that they each had a good Tanaitic precedent to rely on. Put all this as red because this is all Tanaitic. Okay. Bashniya Zachor, moving on in the Mishnah, the second week of the Arba Parshiot gets Parshat Zachor. Itmar, it was said in Amoraic statement, Purim Shechaliyot Be'erev Shabbat, Rav Amar Maktimin Parshat Zachor, Ushmuel Amar Ma'achrin. So if Purim falls out on Friday, then Rav says you move Parshat Zachor to the previous Friday, and Shmuel says you do it the day after Purim, so you make it later, it's the day after Purim. Rav Amar Maktimin, Ki Hechidolo Tiktum Asiya Zachira. The reason Rav says to make Parshat Zachor earlier is so that doing won't come before remembering. In other words, you should first have Zechirat Amalek, and only then can you do Purim. So we don't want to switch that order. Ushmuel Amar Me'achrin, and Shmuel says make it later. Amar Lacha, he would say to you, Kivan Ze'ika Mukfin Ta'avdi B'chamesar Asiya V'Zechira B'Hadei Hadadi Ka'atyan. Since you have Mukafin, since you have cities that are walled and therefore do Purim, right? Even though they don't read Megillah necessarily on that day, but they observe Purim on the 15th. So actually on that Shabbat. So then observance, right, doing and remembering actually come in the same day. So you don't have to worry about not putting the remembering before, they actually come together. So again, two opinions, two reasonings. We don't quite know what to say about it. We don't know which way to go, so we're going to try to prove it. Snan. B'shniya Zachor. So we learned in our Mishnah, on the second one, you read Zachor. V'haki mikla reish yarcha b'Shabbat, mikla Purim be'erev Shabbat. And when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat, then Purim is going to come out on Friday. V'katani b'shniya Zachor. And we learned in the Mishnah that on the second Shabbat, you should do Zachor. So meaning that will be the second Shabbat of Adar. So isn't it clear that you should read Parshat Zachor on that second Shabbat? So, right, it seems like the Shabbat before Purim should be the Shabbat that you read Zachor, just like Rav, right? Because Purim's going to fall out Friday 2 weeks from then. So that would be right before the third Shabbat. So you need to read Parshat Zachor on the second Shabbat, which is the Shabbat that precedes it. Amar Rav Papa, but Rav Papa is going to defend Shmuel. My Shniya, what does second mean in this context? Shniya lahafsaka. Second, counting from the Shabbat that we paused. In other words, it's just the second Shabbat, like the second special Shabbat, but it doesn't count the one where you didn't do any special parsha. It doesn't count that Shabbat. So we didn't prove anything. We haven't been conclusive one way or the other. Tashma, Ezo Shabbat Shnia, which is the second Shabbat, Kol Shechal Purim Liyot B'Tocha, Va'afil Be'erev Shabbat. So it counts as the second Shabbat if Purim falls out during it, even if Purim falls out on Friday. My love Erev Shabbat du Tocha, Ma Tocha Maktimin, Af Erev Shabbat Maktimin. Isn't it the case that Erev Shabbat is like Tocha, is like during the week? So just as when Purim falls within the week, meaning Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we move the reading to the previous Shabbat. So too on Friday, when Purim falls on Friday, we move the reading to the previous Shabbat, just like Rav said. But Shmuel is going to defend himself. Amar Shmuel, ba. But Shmuel says, again, change the word from betocha to ba. V'chen tanid bei Shmuel, ba. And in fact, it was taught this way in the house of Shmuel, ba. So then it reads, any Shabbat on which we have Purim, and also if it falls on Erev Shabbat, right? The ba there means that it's including Erev Shabbat in Shabbat. So then the second Shabbat for reading the Arba Parshiot is the one on which Purim occurs. So you read Parshat Zachor that week that Purim is happening, that Shabbat. Chalio B'Shabbat Atzma. So again, Shmuel successfully defended himself, but we're moving on to the next case. Chalio B'Shabbat Atzma. If it falls out on Shabbat itself, meaning Purim falls out on Shabbat itself. So when do you read Zachor? Amar Rav Huna, L'divrei hakol ein maktimin. So Rav Huna says then everyone would agree, meaning both Rav and Shmuel would agree that you don't move the reading, you don't move Zachor earlier, right? You read Zachor on that day. Rav Nachman Amar, and Rav Nachman says, Adayin hi machloket. No, it's still a machloket, right? In other words, you would still have Rav saying, move it to the previous Shabbat, and Shmuel saying, presumably, keep it on that Shabbat. But Rav would still have you move it earlier because he wants Zechira to come actually before Purim, and it's not enough for them to come at the same time. That's how Rashi interprets it. Itmar Nami was also said, Amar B'chia bar Abba, Amar B'Abba, Amar Rav, Purim shechal liyot b'Shabbat, makdim v'koreh b'Shabbat she'avra Zachor. Right, same idea, meaning we have now confirmation that Rav thinks this. When Purim falls out on Shabbat, we move it earlier and read Parshat Zachor on the previous Shabbat. And I didn't read you all the Rashis that are here, but I mentioned the important ones just to see what's there, and we'll stop here.